So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and kick it off as we've got the call planned for about 30 minutes today. So I would like to give just kind of a brief introduction. So this is the agenda we're planning on going through. Again, I'm Nick Cruz, and I work in marketing and business development here at TerraSky. I will be going through a brief recap of our Dreamforce 14 session, which we called Reimagining Visual Force Development. I've got a few slides to share from our customer presenters on that, but won't spend too much time, as we do have the recording available if you'd like to watch that to see more detail. We can share that with you as well. But then after that recap of our Dreamforce session, I will introduce Tony Nelson, who's a sales engineer and overall technical guru here at TerraSky for Sky Visual Editor. So he's going to go through some of the latest and greatest coming up in our next release, which will be version 3.6. and then go through some actual demos of the product itself and then address any questions that come up. So once again, use that chat panel to ask any questions, and that way we can kind of go through them in an orderly fashion. If for any reason we run out of time and don't get to your questions, then we can certainly follow up after the webinar and have a more detailed discussion on a call. So without further ado, I, again, would like to recap our Dreamforce session. So the session was called Reimagining Visual Force Development, and we thought it'd be a great time to challenge the attendees of the session to really use their imagination. That's really what user experience is all about. And that's what we're trying to aim for with Sky Visual Editor with drag and drop functionality. So we challenge people to kind of use their imagination and to help with that, with prodding people to get ideas and stuff. We actually had two of our customers join on and go through examples and use cases of what they've used the Sky Visual Editor platform to achieve. Now, both of these customer speakers are have very different use cases and different technical backgrounds. So I'll be kind of recapping briefly the use cases they presented from both Western Union, where we had the European administrator for their platform, Alex Walwork. And he's a very non-technical kind of button-click admin, doesn't have any previous coding experience. And then we contrasted their use case with Millrose Consultants, where the CIO, Michael Richardson, presented on their use, where he has a development staff of about 25 people using our platform to generate custom Visual Force pages. And he shared how he found us just at the right time, actually, at an event out in New York. But to dive a little deeper into the examples that they shared during the session, so Western Union, as I mentioned, doesn't have a lot of coders and developers available, at least in their European office, and they really enjoyed the ability to drag and drop to design custom pages, and they focused specifically on an initial use case to redefine and kind of rebuild an approval process that had proved pretty challenging. They were using the Salesforce approval process that is on the platform and native to the platform, and the pages that they designed were actually able to very easily integrate with that process. But it took very few clicks to deploy the page. And what they used is the grid layout for inside of the Sky Visual Editor for that approval process to align some data that needs to be reviewed by multiple different types of users. So they have sales users, finance users, and legal users who are all looking at these same pages. And this helped them to easily color code and align a lot of this data directly from Salesforce on a page. And do some color coding, make everything very easy to review, and it actually helped reduce their time for each approval by about 50%. So creating more efficiency through customization. Now, the adverse, like I said, Millrose Consultants, they have much more technical users, and their use case is very different from Western Union. So they actually leveraged Sky Visual Editor to recreate forms inside of Salesforce as Visualforce pages, and they actually worked on what they call their Wave Business Platform, and that's just an internal name for what they created. But the idea was to actually take master forms, set them as a PDF background, and work with them inside of the studio editor, which is shown here in this screenshot, and you'll see more. But once they have that background image, they were able to easily just take fields that are already in their Salesforce instance, drag them out onto the screen, and recreate these forms digitally. Now, they have many different signatories for some of these forms. And some of them require up to 6 different signatures from different folks. So with the pages, they're able to actually select what type of signatory they need for each of these forms, and then actually generates the form. And they have some mobile users accessing these forms from iPads and iPhones and things out in the field, so that they're able to easily generate these digital forms, and eliminates quite a lot of paper. So once they select their signatories, they generate the form. It pulls up in digital format. They can actually go ahead and enter all the relevant information that they need, and the form is ready for publishing. They can capture an image of that inside of their system. They've captured all the data that is input into all of the different fields. All that lives on their platform, and then they can actually generate a PDF and share that with anyone that's relevant. So you know, a lot of complex, formerly complex business processes have been captured onto the platform, and you know, customized onto Visualforce pages, and helps them move along much faster, much greener, and much more efficiently. So 2 very different use cases. Millrose actually started off and had an existing project in the works that would have taken them several months, would have missed their initial go-live date, but then they deployed Sky Visual Editor and actually generated about 400 of these PDF forms as Visualforce pages within about 3 months. So very complex use case. They still have a lot of custom coding to define a lot of the business processes around this, but the drag and drop functionality helps shrink the project significantly so that they can actually hit their go-live date. So that's just a brief recap that I wanted to go over on the Dreamforce session. Like I said, the session was recorded. It is available. I'll point out on one of these previous slides as I started off here, the link appears right at the bottom, and we're going to share these slides and follow up, so you can go through that link. It's also accessible through our homepage as well. So if you do want to view that, certainly can in more detail. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tony Nelson, who's our sales engineer and overall technical guru here, and he's going to go through the latest and greatest coming up in our next release. So I'm going to actually unmute Tony here. Bear with me.
I think I'm actually unmuted. Can you hear me?
Oh, perfect. I can hear you. Yep.
All right, great. All right, very good. So if you can transition to the next slide real quick. This is sort of what we have coming up in version 3.6. The ETA for this upcoming version is going to be somewhere between late January and early to mid-February, depending on I guess the speed at which we can get beta testers' feedback. And this is quite a massive release for us. So for those of you who were able to come by Dreamforce, we do have our Visualforce import that we were showcasing there. And what this basically means is that any previously created pages that you have designed or a partner, implementation partner has created by hand will now be able to be imported into Sky Visual Editor and maintained in the drag and drop capacity. This is something that we've been asked for, I guess, coming up on 1.5 years now from our users, and we finally were able to reverse engineer or figure out how to reverse engineer developers that were out there hand coding everything. So this is a really, really exciting thing for us, especially now that Salesforce has announced their new Lightning platform. We've been working with Salesforce on the Lightning product for quite some time, and so this was one of our key components in helping Salesforce realize how to go from Visualforce to the new Lightning framework that they've got. So we will be kind of the bridge between the two frameworks moving forward, but we'll leave Lightning for a different date and different discussion about Sky Visual Editor. The next one is that we've been asked to be able to have our pages templatized. And so now we're going to be adding in methodology for you to change the main objects of your pages or any fields that you need to reference. You can now change them up so that you can create one page design and then quickly switch the object reference as needed so that you can reference other things in other organizations but continue to utilize the same page layout. We are upgrading our API version to utilize some of the new functionality that's coming out. We're supporting some of the quote and the order object. We're giving the users the capability of filtering their data tables as the logged-in users. So this is a really common thing if you wanted to have, let's say, a home page component created where you were using something that you generated from Sky Visual Editor and you only wanted it to show content that was relevant to that user who's actually viewing that particular component. So that's now going to be possible. We have a new code block component. This is going to replace our developer component today. But it basically means if you have a developer on staff who wants to inject their own custom code, we're now going to make that a much more efficient and true development style component as opposed to our previous one, which allowed you to do it but didn't have as much flexibility. Then we have also opened up and exposed a little more of the back-end coding to the users for their more technical staff. So we're going to now allow you to add in your own custom attributes and your own custom styles directly in line at each of the component level. Now, for those of you who are not necessarily developers or don't have developers on staff, here are some things that are coming up that I think you'll get excited about. The first of which is that we're now going to have object searching inside of our studio. So anytime that you have to go and select an object, you previously had to scroll through your entire object structure to find the one that you wanted to utilize, and that was fine, but if you have hundreds of objects in your Salesforce environment, you could scroll for a little while if you didn't know the exact API name that you were looking for. So this allows us to quickly have the user search to filter out everything and address that information very quickly. The next thing that we're adding in is the capability of doing inline editing on all pages. So this is another commonly requested thing that we offer the capability of doing inline editing. So the pages will not be inline editable by default. We do want the users to be able to choose to check that. So by default, whenever you create a page, you have the option of making something view only or edit only with the capability of choosing inline editing as an option. So that'll be in there. And then the last one is going to be dynamic table filtering. So the concept behind this is if you wanted to have, let's say that you were viewing an account and you had 15 contacts that existed for that account, and you wanted to find only the people that lived within, let's say, the state of Texas for that particular company. You could type in the letters TX and it would begin to filter out the table to only show the records that actually contain data that's relevant to whatever you were actually typing in. So this is going to take your ability to work with related lists, especially when they're large related lists, to a whole nother level. So we're very excited about that announcement. With that, Nick, do you mind passing control over to me? I will go ahead and share my screen. And what we'll go through is, I guess, a brief demonstration on how to use two different layouts inside of Sky Visual Editor. I'll take about 10 minutes to do both of these because, number one, it's that fast to make pages, and number two, it's that simple and easy to understand. So if you have questions, please enter them in the right-hand panel, and we'll make sure to answer those toward the end of this. But as you can see here on the screen, we're looking at an account record in view-only mode at the moment, but as you can see, I've made a number of changes to this account layout. It doesn't look anything like you would typically see inside of Salesforce. The first thing you should notice is that we have blue and gray color theme throughout the entire page. This is because I've taken the TerraSky website color theme and I've applied it to Salesforce to create a better branded experience for the users. This is the same thing that you could do for a portal or like a community or a Force.com sites or something of that nature. We're going to provide a very specific branded company type of experience. The next thing that you should notice is that there are 4 columns across the top, followed by a series of interior tabs where we have data organized and stored. So inside of my tabs, I have things like the contact records where I can quickly view that related list. So you no longer have to scroll down to the bottom of the page to find that data. You can now organize it into nice clean tabs near the top of the screen if you'd like. And then on top of that, you can even choose to filter them if you'd like to have only certain subsets of data shown. One example being you could filter by the viewing user. Another nice feature that we've added in is what we call a details panel. So many people love the sales and service console, but those are only available in console view. One thing that we've done is we've taken the concept of the sales and service console and we've applied it to the rest of Salesforce. So you now can open up a related record on the right-hand side of your screen or at the bottom of your screen while looking at your main record on the left-hand side or at the top so that you can have side-by-side comparisons of data if you needed to. This is great for sales or just updating something. If you had like a related list where you had a quote or some kind of legal contract that you were reviewing, you could pull that PDF version of it or the contract up on the right-hand side to modify that very quickly, save it, close it, and your user never had to leave the page. So it provides a nice, great experience for the user to interact with. So we'll actually recreate this page in today's demonstration. And the next portion of this is what we call the uniform, or I guess the free layout, and I will be recreating the uniform residential loan application. And in this particular example, if you wanted a form put into Salesforce, you typically would see a page that looks like this. Well, in Sky Visual Editor, we can actually take a form, upload it to Salesforce, and then reproduce something that looks like the physical document that the user was used to working with. So you are able to come in and actually fill in the values and have it look like the user is actually filling out the form right inside of Salesforce without having to go and do some complex Visual Force development. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I've got a couple of minutes to do this. You'll go to skyvisualeditor.com, log into the environment, and then we'll just get started. To do this, I'm going to go to File, Load Page Layout. I'm going to choose the account object, so we'll choose Account. It's going to load in the record types that exist for that account, and then we'll click Open. And what this will do is it'll pull in all of the different custom fields, any custom relationships you've got for that particular object, and then make it available for our studio to work with. On the left-hand side, you'll see there's a navigation panel with all of the visual components you can drag onto the canvas. Center of the screen is going to be the actual Visual Force page we'll be working with. And then the right-hand side of the screen are all the properties that you can change and modify to make adjustments to that particular component. And then what we'll do is we'll just, like I said, reproduce that account page that we had looked at previously. Now, one of the things that we should note is that I only have 2 columns in normal Salesforce. So if I wanted to get to the 4-column view, I would need to select that particular section. And on the right-hand side, there's a series of properties that have now appeared. I will increase the columns property to a 3 and then a 4. And notice there's two new columns that exist for this particular section. So I now can drag fields from left to right, and it's going to operate very similar to the page layout editor for those of you who are used to designing and working with that. It's going to feel very similar to that. But at the end of the day, we're going to be creating a Visual Force page when this is actually sent to Salesforce. So once you're done adjusting all the fields and placing them into the different columns, another quick change that we may want to do is add in that blue coloring. So on the right-hand side, I can select the color settings and actually choose a blue here, or maybe a red in this one. Let's see, color settings, and then we'll choose a red for this one. Okay, so you can bypass the standard color theme that Salesforce has. Next, what we'll do is we'll go to the component palette, and we'll grab what we call a tab component and place that onto the canvas. Now, inside of these tabs, we're actually going to scroll down, find our related lists that are at the bottom of the page, and drag them upward and place them inside of those tabs. So inside of the first tab, I'll call this, let's see, our contact related list. So I will select tab 1, and we will call this my contact data here. And there you go. We've now produced a tab that allows the user to reference their contact data very quickly. And the same thing for tab number 2. We can do this for the opportunity data in this particular case, and place that opportunity-related list right inside of there for the user to work with. Now, you have lots of flexibility in how this is done, so this is just one of many possible examples that are out there. And the next thing that I'll do is we'll actually address something that Western Union had done, where we have placed in what we call a panel grid to reproduce the look of Excel. So you can put inside of Sky Visual Editor's pages a grid that will mimic the look of Excel for people that are used to managing all of that stuff in third-party systems. Instead of having that happen, since you can't report on that data, go ahead and have them enter in that information, but allow them to keep that same experience of a grid-like format. And this is really good if you're trying to track and trend things over a period of time, and you typically would have to have 30 or 40 fields to do that. Being able to lay them out in a very compact and confined way is a great way of organizing that content for the users to look at. Another common thing that people ask for is the ability to dynamically show or hide content. For example, if we wanted the address information, the section that's highlighted in red, to only appear when a certain value is entered, one of the things that we can do is click the display settings for this particular component. Now let's say that I wanted the section to be based on the account type. So if account type is equal to a value, and let's choose prospect, then we want this section to show. And if it's not equal to prospect, then keep the address information hidden from the user. So this is just a real quick example of how you can create a page very quickly using Sky Visual Editor. Now once we're done designing the page, we can click File, Deploy. It's going to ask you whether you're going to sandbox or production, and then you actually send this page out to your environment. Now what will happen is we will create your Visual Force code, your Apex controller, and all the code coverage that comes along with that, and send that into Salesforce. So as a developer, you don't have to worry about any of that, and if you're not a developer, you don't have to worry about any of that. It's all handled and taken care of for you behind the scenes. Now, if you notice, I didn't do a bit of coding. Not one single line of code was entered in for me to actually get this page to Salesforce. However, if you are a developer, we do have sections of our platform that allow you to get into the code and really add in or inject in your own custom snippets of code as needed, because there are things that our platform just won't cover because it's so specific to your business needs. So we provide outlets for you to address those issues. Now, if you notice here, we have these two pages that are deployed, and we have the ability of opening this page. So this is the page we created in just a couple of minutes using Sky Visual Editor. Notice that there's 4 columns across the top. We've got the contact data inside of tab number 1, opportunity data inside of tab number 2, and then tab 3 has got the grid where we're actually showing the Excel-like structure. But notice there is no section for the red banner that we had created for address information. That's because the account type, remember, is not equal to prospect. So if I select this to be equal to prospect, that new address information will now appear. So we've just shown you several ways of enhancing the user experience without having to do any coding whatsoever. And this can be taken to a much greater magnitude in terms of user experience. So we'll move right into the next one and then open this up for Q&A, but I've got a couple of minutes left. The next example that we're going to show is using what we call the free layout. Now our free layout is how we actually create pages from scratch using pixel-based locations to design the page, meaning instead of containers for everything, it has an X and a Y coordinate, which allows us to place fields onto an image which looks like a PDF that you may have generated. So what we can do is select background, and this time I want to place a document as a background for me to overlay my Salesforce fields on top of for the user to interact with. So I'll choose the form that I'm going to place onto the page, and then it's going to show up far too large for this screen, so I will resize it, but then I can begin overlaying the fields that I want to interact with to produce a page that looks like a physical document that the user would interact with. So if you notice, page is far too large, so I can resize this to something more accommodating here. And now there's nothing on the page. So on the left-hand side, we have a field bank. Notice you don't have to build out data models. You don't have to go in and understand APIs or anything like that. We pull it all in for you. So now you can go ahead and drag on a field, drop it onto the canvas, and then stretch this field out to make it fill that entire section. And we'll do this for a couple of fields, but you get the basic concept. You drag and drop the fields where they need to go and place them at the appropriate location. So we'll do the same thing for like the interest rate. We'll shrink this one because it's a little too large, and then the amount field. Okay, and once you get everything in place, notice there's no save or cancel button on this page. So for this, I will scroll down, find a save button, place that onto the canvas, and place a cancel button onto the canvas. You'll go through the same exercise of clicking File, Deploy, now that we're done, choose Sandbox or Production, and yet once again click the Deploy button. Now this is, at the end of the day, going to produce a document that's similar to this. I obviously didn't fill out the whole document as thoroughly as this one here, but this is going to be the basic thing that we've just recreated in a couple of minutes. So given a little bit more time, you can actually fill out the document to the full extent that you would need. But this allows you to provide that document type of experience when the user is viewing or editing a record, not just when they want to create and generate a PDF of some kind to email to a client or to email internally, but when they're actually editing a record, they can view the contents on a physical document. You have no clue how many people we hear from that just get so frustrated about their pen and paper process that they wish they could get into Salesforce because users just aren't adopting the current look and feel of Salesforce due to those changes. So this helps address some of those issues. With that, we are coming up on time, so I will hand this back over to Nick, and we will begin addressing questions with the last couple of minutes that we've got. Thank you so much for your time and attention.